July 26, 1184, Erfurt, Holy Roman Empire. King Henry VI called a meeting. 60 nobles attended. The floor collapsed. They fell 2 stories into a cesspit full of human waste. Henry survived. He was sitting in the stone alcove. The 60 were not. Their combined weight was the problem. The rotten floor was the mechanism. The cesspit was the destination. The Holy Roman Empire in 1184 was not an empire in any coherent administrative sense. Charlemagne had assembled it roughly 400 years earlier, and it had spent the intervening centuries discovering what happens when you govern a patchwork of feudal territories through loyalty agreements rather than actual administration. The answer: constant low-grade disputes between nobles who all believe the same piece of land belongs to them. The specific dispute that killed 60 people in July 1184 had roots in an earlier dispute. Henry the Lion, Duke of Saxony and Bavaria, had refused to support Emperor Frederick Barbarossa's military campaigns in Italy. In the feudal system, this was not a disagreement to be talked through. Barbarossa had the Lion tried, stripped of his titles at the 1180 Diet of Wurzburg, and exiled to England from 1182 to 1185. The Lion's land was redistributed. The redistribution created new territorial claims. 2 of those claims collided between Landgrave Louis III of Thuringia and Archbishop Conrad of Mainz, whose dispute had been simmering since the original Henry the Lion crisis. Someone had to resolve it. Frederick Barbarossa was occupied. His son Henry VI, 18 years old and en route to a military campaign in Poland, was in the area. His father ordered him to stop in Erfurt and sort it out. Open loop 2. The dispute between Louis and Conrad. Was it ever resolved? Meme sting. In medieval governance, every land dispute traces back to an earlier land dispute, which traces back to a war, which traces back to an even earlier land dispute. It is turtles all the way down. Henry VI, 18 years old, King of Germany since 1169, technically, though effective rule was a different matter. He was on his way to a military campaign in Poland. His father intercepted him mid-March with different orders. Go to Erfurt, mediate the Louis-Conrad dispute, demonstrate that the imperial family could keep the nobles in line. The Hoftag was the instrument for doing this. A Hoftag court day was an informal assembly, less structured than a Reichstag, used by the king to convene nobles and resolve disputes in person. It carried the weight of royal authority. If the king summoned you to a Hoftag, you came. You brought your staff. You brought your household. You came with the full weight of your household and rank visible, because the Hoftag was partly about demonstrating that weight, about showing up and being counted as a loyal subject and a significant power. Henry convened the Hoftag for July 25, the Feast of St. James, a symbolic date. Invitations went out across the region. Louis and Conrad and everyone with an interest in the dispute received word that the king himself was coming to settle things. Nobody wanted to miss it. Everyone who was anyone arrived. Everyone wanted to be seen at the king's table, or at least the king's assembly room. The assembly room was in the Petersburg Citadel, the largest structure in Erfurt, a fortified monastery on a hill. Medieval latrines, particularly monastic ones, were engineered around the principle of vertical disposal. Waste dropped from the latrine bench through channels or chutes to an underground cesspit below. The cesspit was the permanent holding facility. It was large by design. Monks needed it to operate without frequent emptying, because emptying a cesspit was an extremely unpleasant job that nobody volunteered for. The monastery at Petersburg had built their cesspit accordingly, extra large, designed for long-term accumulation, a deep underground chamber, vaulted, capable of holding enormous quantities of material. The sources describing it note that by July 1184, the pit had been doing its job for long enough that it was very full. Open loop 3. What was the cesspit actually like as a physical environment? This matters for understanding what happened to the people who fell into it. The meeting room for the Hoftag was on the upper floor of this building. The floor of the upper room was wooden, supported by wooden beams. Those beams were rotten. The building's ground floor was between the wooden meeting room and the cesspit.